Dylan, to celebrate this podcast episode being the first one available on video, check us out on Spotify, by the way, or on YouTube, I've got a little game to play.
Okay, good. I mean, I'm going to tell the customers right now that they missed out on you trying to do this 3 times because you were nervous about the camera being on. But let's go straight into the game.
Do you know what I did? I broke the fourth wall like this. Ugh. Okay, you can't do that in a podcast.
What a way to switch our viewers off straight away. The first ever time they viewed us to see your googly eyes staring down at them down the camera.
And if you're listening, this is all nonsense. So let's get started with the game. I have got 3 statements, okay? And this first round of this game is this, right? You've got to guess which statement is something a child has actually said to me this week, and which 2 are not things. Yeah, this is like fresh out of the kitchen. What children have said to me this week. Only one of them's real though, okay? So,
all right.
First statement. Mr. Stevens, if you were a superhero, you'd be Eggman. And then the child proceeded to look at my head. Statement 2. My dad thought you were older than him, and it's his 45th birthday today.
Solid start.
And number 3. Does Mr. Price do more YouTube videos than you because he has hair? Which one of those statements do you think is actually something a child said to me?
Do you know what's quite sad? All of them sound realistic.
I know. I did quite well.
I think it's the more YouTube videos one because I don't think that you would have wanted to make that one up. So I think that one's true.
It's not. I made that one up. I was really proud of that one because we've been doing loads of YouTube videos this week. So
yeah,
no, it's not. It was the first one. A child randomly came up to me, you know, like they do when they just want to roast you. I said, "Yeah, if you're a superhero, you'd be Eggman," and then pointed at my head, and was like,
"I wonder what
ran off."
What superpower would Eggman have? I can fry myself on the floor.
I'm made of yolk. Anyway, I've got
I absolutely stink.
Yeah, don't let me go rotten. I've got a second round. Okay, this time, so it's the same sort of principle, 3 statements. Okay. This one is...
Well, the first round was so good, so I can't wait for this one.
Shut up. Guess which statement is something that really happened to me working in schools. Now, I had to think hard about this one because we've worked together a lot, so I had to try and make them obscure enough. So first one, ready? During a snow fight with the children, I slipped over and I gave myself a nosebleed.
That's you all over.
I know.
That's you all over. Keep going.
Plenty of snow fights over the years. Always good. Other teachers hate me because I'll go out and have a snow fight in the field. Terrible. Number 2, a child brought me in a wig to wear because they thought it was funny. Obviously, I did wear it. So, okay.
Okay. All right.
And number 3, I organised a school trip to the wrong place entirely, and then I turned up at the place I thought I booked, which was not booked.
You're on like a self-deprecating mode here. None of these show you in a good light. Like nothing so far in this game. I reckon the snow fight one you've made up because you've tried to be clever doing it close to one, because I know there's loads of snow stories with you. The school trip one, I feel like I would have known. I feel like I would have known that. You would have told me if you booked the wrong place. I'm going to go for the wig being true.
Well done, you got that one right. They did.
Yeah.
And it was actually this week.
What else has happened this week?
I know, I thought it's too many good things. I have to do another round. But yeah, but in a wig. Oh, what can I say?
Oh my goodness. Okay, well, that was a fantastic game. What a way to celebrate the video, guys. Hey, yeah, the whole thing's like this. So let's crack on, shall we? Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Teach, Sleep, Repeat. This is episode 14. My name is Dylan.
And my name is Hayden.
And it's back to the old intro that we've loved so much. We were off last week. We didn't do a podcast. I had literally one person message me asking me where we were.
That's nice, isn't it? All of our follower base then.
Yeah, all of them. Rishi, he was a bit bogged down with all the stuff going on, local elections. But he found the time to message us. So I thought that was really nice of him.
Hang on. I messaged you and asked where you were.
Oh,
was that?
Wait. Have you been pretending to be Rishi Sunak for the last 3 months?
Am I the only person that asked? But okay. Do you know what? Ignore it.
So, thank you, customers, for absolutely not missing us whatsoever. Been a bit of a jam-packed week or two, really. So, Hayden, what have you been up to, pal?
What, over the last 2 whole weeks of recap? Oh, man. Well, as you can tell from my head, if you're watching the video, which you can do, by the way, we're going to keep saying that.
Whoa, you can watch us on video now.
Whoa, look at us moving. Bit sunburned.
We should probably come up with a name for the people who actually watch us on video. Some kind of, negative connotation, because they're being creeps, really, aren't they? Like, it's a podcast. Why are you watching us?
So, okay. Wait, can you think of a name?
We'll come up with it. Well, we'll think about it. We'll think about it. Maybe the viewers could come up with their own self-deprecating name. We'll have customers who listen just audio, and we'll come up with some kind of name for the weirdos who like to watch us for some reason for an hour sat in our chair.
There you go. You got it. The weirdos who like to watch us for some reason for an hour sat in their chair.
That's a bit of a mouthful, but should we go for that?
Easy.
Okay,
well,
cool. Nice one.
If it's anything like this podcast, check out our email address. Check out our Instagram name. It's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it, really? I can't wait to make a YouTube channel that we haven't even made yet. God knows what that's going to be called.
This is the place where you can get videos from Teach Sleep Repeat podcast from Hayden and Dylan and all the creeps who want to watch us via our video.
Oh, God. Oh, it's terrible. Anyway, my week.
Yeah, what have you been up to?
My week. I won't talk about the main thing of my week because that's the main point of this podcast. Obviously, it's Sats week. We'll come back to that. But other than that, got a bit of a sunburn on my head. I know, I haven't got hair. And as you can tell, I thought it'd be really good for the first time we do record it on video if I had a stonking cold and I look horrible. So enjoy my crusty nose. I tell you what, if you are listening on Spotify and you weren't convinced before to come and watch this on video, crusty nose.
I think Spotify automatically plays the video, but I was also thinking, what percentage of our podcast is you talking about your lack of hair? It must be pretty high.
It's probably about as many hairs as I have, so about 90%. 90. Oh.
Okay. Yeah. Well, unless you're under a rock, we had a whole thing this week. Going back to episode 1 of the podcast when we had a bit of a chat with Charlie, our mate down Windsor. Give us a bank holiday. Yeah. Give us a bank holiday because we've managed to pass over a golden crown to a weird old man who we all meant to sit and sing about.
It was good.
That's cool.
It was good. I really enjoyed. Someone made a really, really good edit of the moment in which he is crowned with the moment in which he's crowned in the Johnny English film, if you remember that. From a long time ago. It cut perfectly, and then obviously Rowan Atkinson flies in and sits on the throne and gets crowned. And I couldn't believe how well this satirical piece from 20 years ago cut with the real life coronation of the king. That's brilliant. So funny.
I've seen one with Camilla, because obviously Camilla got a crown as well. He managed to bag that, didn't he? Didn't see old Prince Philip get a crown for 70 odd years. Camilla comes in, swoops in, she gets a crown. Anyway, it was putting the crown on their head, and someone had dubbed over the audio from Harry Potter when the Sorting Hat puts Draco into Slytherin. It goes close to her head. Slytherin!
That's so bad. If we've got any royalist fans, I'm going to turn this off now, Dylan.
If we've got any royalist fans, you can. I'm going over my words. I don't know what to say.
He didn't want to insult you. He was going to insult you and then didn't.
One of my mates who listens to the podcast messaged me going, "Wow!" With no input, just messaged me going, "Wow, Dylan, were you that riled up by the coronation that you couldn't bear to go into a podcast?" Yeah, I was fuming. Some kind of Republican madman just sat here fuming about this old bloke. He was probably nice enough, but the whole thing stinks to me. I don't know about you. Absolutely hate it. Oh, cost of living crisis. Let's go and watch the golden carriage go past. How lovely. For God's sake.
I did enjoy. Honestly. A lot of people shared that picture of that kind of bird's eye view shot of all the potholes being filled with sand. Did you see that one?
No,
it was just, the caption was just the irony here. We can't even afford to repair our roads, but we've got this big golden carriage made of pumpkins and pulled by a fairy or something.
It's unbelievable.
I don't know.
It's unbelievable.
Anyway.
So I spent a bit of time getting unnecessarily annoyed at that. Went to a barbecue that was coronation themed. Drinking out of a cup with a crown on it. Didn't feel right, but did it anyway because bit of meat on a barbie. I'm gonna do it anyway.
Your morals go right out the window when there's food and drink involved. Doesn't matter. Yeah, whatever.
What's that? 17 glasses of lemonade? Okay, and a burger. That's right on my street. Some nice pop.
I do love that king drinking.
That's me. So yeah. And not bad, but we're back now. We're back on the podcast, and I was thinking the whole time, I was like, I can't wait to moan about it. Because actually, what this is going to segue really nicely into is the bulk of this episode. So like you said, Hayden, it is SATs week for year 6. They're doing their Key Stage 2 SATs. After our short break, which is literally the 3-second jingle, we're going to come back and hold on, guys. Okay. Yeah. Make sure you get through that 3-second jingle.
Go to the toilet, grab a tea. Go on.
But 3 seconds, come back. We're going to have a chat about all things SATs, and we're going to get deep, right, Hayden?
We are.
So as we record this is literally year 6 SATs week. And I like to call it Key Stage 2 because that is like a very quick thing we'll probably get into later.
Yeah.
You know, it is testing the whole of Key Stage 2. So there's questions in these papers that, they learn in the year 3 and year 4. Most of it's year 6, but it is the Key Stage 2 SATs. There's a lot of controversy around these tests over the years. It's kind of been overshadowed this year, I guess, with the whole striking and coronation and all that stuff. So there's been I feel like there's been less of a discussion than there has been in previous years about, how useful they are or whether we should do them or not. But you're literally in year 6, Hayden, doing them this week. So, exactly. What are your thoughts?
So, first of all, I'm just going to say a bit of a disclaimer, just protecting our jobs here, Dylan. Bit of a disclaimer for everyone.
Would like my job.
Anything we talk about in this podcast episode is not related to the actual SATs this week in terms of content. We cannot discuss content of the papers during the SATs week. That'd be very silly, and we're not doing that. So just putting that out there in case anyone thinks, hey, they're discussing what's in the papers this week. We're not. We might reflect on old papers and old years, but we're not talking about this week. Anyway, now that I've got that out of the way. So yes, we are recording today. Obviously, this is Wednesday, and this will be released on Friday at the end of SATs week, but we are midway through the SATs week. Bit strange for a start. It's really thrown me off because obviously we had Bank Holiday Monday for the King, and the day we got off for SATs week in the midst of the mail and the establishment moaning because every single second of child's education is precious, but we have to sit around and drink out of a... Yeah, exactly. We have to drink 17 lemonades and have a barbecue, that kind of thing.
Man in gold carriage going down the mall. Let's go and...
Yeah, so honestly, that was a bit weird. So it has thrown us off a little bit because I keep thinking I'm a day behind or day ahead, whatever. And... But no, it's going well. It's just like any other SATs week, any other year, really, to be honest with you. It's just a bit strange that the kids came back after 3 days. But what do you want to talk about? Do we want to dive into,
Well, I think, so again, there's lots of people listening to this podcast who aren't teachers, lots of people who are. So very quickly, maybe we could just summarize, what are the Key Stage 2 SATs? Because I think a lot of people listening will vaguely remember doing some kind of test at the end of year 6. So, what are they? What do they involve? And then we can maybe get into the nitty-gritty of, should we put our children through this? Because it can become quite full of pressure, really,
all right,
can't it?
Dylan, I'm going to take you on a bit of a journey then. I'm going to go back in time a little bit, give the listeners and you some real context to the SATs.
And the viewers, remember.
Hey.
I'm looking at you.
We're breaking that 4-4 again, aren't we? Those people listening, yeah, rubbish.
Who's turned off?
Rubbish bit for you.
Who's turned it off? We're going to see a retention drop in the middle of our stats.
Yeah. Right now. Awkward. The only time Dylan will ever look you in the eye. Okay, so back in 1988, before we were born, Dylan, we were nice and young, the Tory government brought in the Education Reform Act, right? And then in 1989, that's when the first compulsory national curriculum was actually put in place in the UK. And then it was only a couple of years later, in 1991, when they actually introduced the SATs, okay? So the SATs were introduced simply as a means of assessing schools' delivery of the national curriculum that they just put in place, which was obviously all new. I can understand the desire to want to check how that's doing. So that's kind of what the SATs was originally and when it came into play. Originally involved in the SATs were 3 main subjects, which is now down to 2 subjects. So you'll know if you're involved in education now in any way, or you have any children going through it, that English and maths are the core things that we talk about all the time. It's English tests, it's maths tests. But it used to be a science test as well. Up until 2009, that's not true. That was the Key Stage 3 SATs. Up until the early 2000s, I do apologise.
I was going to say that was going so well and so boring that it had to go wrong at some point.
No. The best bit was I'm wrong again because it's 2010. All right, I'm looking at the facts, reading the wrong ones. So up until 2010...
Stop. Very quickly, I'm going to just talk to the viewers right now, because what's hilarious is I can't stress to you guys enough how much Hayden said to me, Dylan, we're recording today on video, so we have to be really careful about mistakes, okay? We have to be really careful because it's going to look really weird if we have to do cuts all the time.
That's why we're not cutting that, and that's staying in. All right, so, Dylan, we all make mistakes, all right? It's important to show our customers that...
Oh, don't pull that teacher card out.
It is. We all make mistakes. This is what I say to the kids. If I make a mistake that's genuine, we all make mistakes, and I'm modelling to you what it's like to just own your mistakes, all right? So in 2010...
So I'm sorry. No, really quickly, because I'm calling you out. I'm calling you out because it's what every teacher does. They're like, it's really important to make mistakes, so I'm going to pretend I didn't. It's really important to make mistakes. That's why I modelled this mistake. That's why it wasn't actually a mistake.
I did it on purpose. So have you all learned something from me?
Sister Stevens, you told us to leave the paper blank and we just handed it in. Yes, it was called a mistake, and we'll learn from that, won't we?
Anyway, so science was
2009?
2010. It was 2010. Okay. That was removed. And it was an interesting time because the General Secretary of the National Association of Head Teachers, which is a union, said at the time in an article, like, obviously, we're just annoyed at the fact that we've just randomly taken out a core subject of the SATs if we think the SATs are so important. They said, if there is a concern that tests are turning young children off of science, which was the rationale, by the way, back then the same is true for English and maths. If anything, and this is what they said, this was from an article back in 2010, so I thought it was really cool to read it 13 years later. If anything, this move will simply narrow the curriculum further because it will encourage schools to concentrate on 2 subjects instead of 3.
I mean, talk about obvious, but it came true. Like, honestly, that's crazy, isn't it? And then we spoke about recently about the whole curriculum problem, the problem with the primary curriculum. Have a look at that episode if you haven't. And it kind of exacerbates that, doesn't it? Because we judge schools using these SATs papers, which are exclusively maths and English. But then we have Ofsted and frameworks coming in and judging on the delivery of a broad and balanced curriculum. And it's like, these two things can't work in tandem. What are you doing? What are you talking about? How can we have league tables with SATs, which are just English and maths, but then have so much pressure on delivering an undeliverable curriculum? It's just a hot pot of a bit of a mess, really.
And then on top of that, just to make it, slightly more further apart in terms of those two systems not working, we decided that it would be good to introduce teacher pay that is completely dependent on their performance in those 2 subjects. You just think, I do get paid by performance. I get the rationale of it. But like you said, it doesn't. If you're going to pay teachers more money each year based on how their children perform in English and maths, of course we're going to get this narrow curriculum that just focuses on 2 subjects, because that's what people, like, the schools judged on it. The teachers are paid based on it. Like, what do they think is going to happen? It's going to slip towards this culture of, we do tons of maths and English and everything else gets pushed out of the curriculum. And then we all sit around and moan that we can't fit everything in the curriculum because we're doing so much English and maths, I said in the last episode.
Absolutely true. And the thing that frustrates me even more about that is we still have the expectation of the afternoon curriculum. So you're absolutely right. Like, everything's judged on the morning, but then it's just kind of like said as a by that you've also got to do this. And it's like, okay, are we judged on? No. But Ofsted might come in and judge your framework and do a deep dive into geography. So we have to make sure that is absolutely bad. Like, it's really frustrating talking about it because we both understand and appreciate that every subject, of course, has to be in a perfect place. That's what you always have to strive for. We want the best for the children. But it's just so unrealistic. And the pressure of SATs, we talked about this last week. I wanted to talk to you about this because you're a year 6 teacher. I've never officially taught in year 6. I've done placements in year 6. I've helped out in year 6. You're a year 6 teacher, having done the SATs for a few years now.
Yeah.
I wonder how you see something we coined a few weeks ago in one of our podcasts. We talked about how stupid trickle-down economics was. Like, of course, the money doesn't come down. But then we kind of said, but trickle-down stress and like, pressure. Yeah. And I just worry from the outside looking in when I hear about year 6 boosters for maths and children being invited in their half term to do maths. I just think, who's that for? That is for the school's league table results. And that is for this arbitrary measure of children's targets in secondary school from their SATs results. Children develop at different rates. I just find this pressure from the top down finding its way to the children and being so counterintuitive to like our aims as educators. What do you think? I just feel like the whole thing is counterproductive.
I think it's a bit of a double-sided coin, and I will somewhat disagree with you, not completely, because your rationale behind your point, I understand it, but I also think that, and this goes against everything I normally say, right? But that, like, hopefully you understand, I'm not just suddenly flipping sides and I'm a big Tory now, but. What I think
anything that could be remotely seen as like horrible. I'm not a Tory.
Royalists gone, Tories gone. I'm sorry, we're down to an even smaller base of audience now.
Listen, we want an echo chamber, okay? Tell us we're funny and tell us we're right politically. That's all we want.
But yeah, back to SATs, right? So it's a weird one because you talked about like half-term clubs and doing all these extra boosters and things. I do think that can go too far. And I think that's the point you're making. Like, it gets a bit ridiculous. Like, that's not all school's for. And are we only doing that because we're so worried about our data and our pay progression, all that sort of stuff, that we're doing this? Or is it because we care about the kids? But the reason I think it's a double-edged sword, a double-sided coin, is because also it does keep us accountable as a profession. I do think it makes teachers really, really think twice about everything they're teaching. You can't just take a sort of flippant approach to it. Oh, whatever, what will be, will be. We're all going to be judged on it, mate. So, you need to be making sure you've got the absolute best provision in for your kids. Because if you don't, it's going to be bad for them. And it's also going to be bad for you, by the way. So make sure everything's in place. So there's part of me where it's like, I do get it. And I do think it's great. A lot of these kids thrive. They get all this extra stuff put in place and they absolutely thrive from it. And they end up doing really well. But I do get the pressures and stress. I guess that's the point you're making. I've got a
couple of points to come back to on that because I find it really interesting. And you've remotely disagreed with me, so I've got my back up straight away. I'm joking. So it's really interesting to me. I guess the first thing I wanted to say was it really narrows your focus in terms of like, you're going to be judged on this. And like, that's kind of the point we were just making, which is like, okay, well, if it does narrow my focus, then what's kind of missing out of the kids' holistic approach because of that, if they're not just into maths and English, for example. But the other point, I guess, as well, is if teachers, I know for a fact, have looked at the curriculum before, and instead of thinking, okay, how can I best deliver this curriculum for my children? Because they need to have the curriculum delivered. They've said, okay, what's the best way to get more marks in the SATs paper? Yeah. What can I prioritize? What can I maybe not teach the children because it's not worth my time because not lots of them will get it. But if I spend more time on this instead, that's going to potentially get them more marks in the test at the detriment of their curriculum.
That's a very good point, and that is widely seen across this profession. That's just not like local or like a few schools. I agree. I've seen that from hundreds of people online and things saying that's what they're doing. And yeah, you're probably right. I think as a wider point, you're probably right. I'm going down the perspective of I'm drawn into thinking they're the most important thing. That's probably what I'm doing right now. I'm agreeing that maths and English are the most important thing. They have the highest value. So therefore, doing all these extra boosters and things is great, objectively great for the children because they're going to be better at maths and English, these really highly important things. But I think you've made a good point about, let's not forget though, that the curriculum is supposed to be broad and balanced. And perhaps if we weren't paid based on the results of these and we didn't have league tables, maybe we wouldn't think these are the most important and we'd actually not put these things in place. And instead of doing maths boosters, maybe we'd do some cool PE lesson or some art lesson or some geography that the children are interested in. So yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, it really interests me because I'm not someone who's been in with the pressures of actually being the year 6 teacher, and always when you're on the front line, things are very different. It's a very similar thing, but I went to year 3 in a junior school. Everyone told me before year 3 in a junior school, they come from a different school. Until Christmas sometimes, that's how long it takes them to embed routines and get up to scratch with like the school expectations. I thought it was nonsense. They're saying it will take 15-20 minutes to write the date and the learning objective. I thought it was nonsense. It all turned out to be true. So it's very eye-opening being in the job. So I get that for year 6 teachers listening who think maybe I'm being a bit idealistic, and I like the idea of you being a bit more realistic, coming back with some the actual thing that happens. But from my point of view as well, the problem I see, and it's not something people like to talk about, but it is absolutely true, that it happens where people are so pressurized, whether it's from their own self-belief and wanting to be seen as a good teacher, or from SLT, from the top down, that how can I say this? Not cheating, but absolutely there is such a pressure to get the right scores that, children might be, I want to say it's really politically correctly, because I'm not saying I've seen this happen, but I know for a fact that it does, that, people might be coerced or very tempted to kind of guide children's hands a bit and help a bit more than they're supposed to, or, go around and just say, oh, check that again kind of thing, because it's such a highly pressurized job. And I suppose we see it a lot more. It's linked to SATs because it's how we assess the children and we're judged as teachers, but with the writing moderations and things like that, where it's very tempting to just push that hand and be like,
Well, you're right. And I'm sure, I imagine any normal human being is going to feel that pressure, right? To get these kids to perform. And I think what that does is highlight a really fundamental flaw of the SATs and kind of exams really in general, which is that it's a performance on one day to judge children on 4 years of learning. And it is kind of crazy, really, isn't it? If you think about it, like, let's take a typical grammar, punctuation and spelling test, right? So the children sit a GPS test within their SATs every year. And quite often on the lead up to SATs, we'll do mock tests and things like that, just based on previous years. And so I've become very familiar with SATs papers over the last 5-6 years. And each question is kind of designed to test an area of the curriculum, right? So if you actually look behind the scenes with the SATs, there's all these there's always coding that goes with every question, and it breaks it down. You can find out what the purpose of a question was, or it was testing their ability to use apostrophes in contracted formed words. All right. And there'll be maybe 2 questions on that in the whole paper. 1 usually, because there's so many objectives to teach across the Key Stage 2. And we know what the children can do. And can you just imagine in that hypothetical situation where you're saying, people might be tempted to kind of guide children's hands, where they know that child can do it because they've done it consistently for the last 2 years maybe, and then you see them get it wrong, and that's their one and only chance to show that in the whole 4 years they've learned how to use apostrophes. I think that's the flaw in the system. Why, really? So that kid made a little silly error, or just made a mistake, or just misread the question, and now, as a data point, that child can categorically not do apostrophes now. That's what it means. And it's that's a dangerous game when you're playing with human beings who have this real close bond with this class that they've developed over a year, and they want them to succeed and do well, and we know as teachers what those children can do, like the back of our hand. We know what they can do. So it's a horrible. I saw a meme online, and it was very similar to this. And this is what I mean. I want to make it really clear. I'm not talking about someone stood there telling someone the answer. I'm not talking about that. That's just outright cheating. And I don't believe anyone does that. I know that very, very few, but I don't believe people do that. I'm talking about exactly what you just said, And I saw a meme, and it was hilarious because I remember this being in school. And it was this guy pretending to be a teacher, and he was being like a moderator walking around, right, in an exam hall. Yeah. And he walks up to the person. He's like this. He's like, oh, looking. I can do acting now because this is going on Spotify. Oh yeah, go on then.
YouTube. So he walks up. He goes, oh, and he bends over, and he just goes, ugh, and stands up, goes to the front of the room, turns around and says, guys, you need to remember to check your answers really carefully, and just stares at the person. Yeah. It's like, I remember that so badly in school, where the teacher would be like, we need to make sure we check our answers, okay?
Yeah.
All of our answers, especially the page we're on right now. And they're like staring at the person they just saw off the side.
In the real SATs, we have to, it's really strict for a reason, because at the end of the day, as much as we sort of joke about it and we say like how people might be pressurized, it is imperative that nobody does that. As we both agree, we've had this discussion before, like it can't be a standardized tests if it's not standardized in the way it's delivered, right? So we are literally given like scripts in the morning to read off of, and we have these little booklets that we have to read through. For example, if you are a one-to-one reader for a child, because certain children qualify for having an adult helping them read the questions. There is like a whole guidance booklet of things you can and can't do, and you must follow it. And I get why they've made all these things. It's to avoid people thinking, oh, I'm not breaking the rules if I just, go and tap on the desk and get them to reread a question. I'm not helping them. I've not told them any content. I'm just, I've noticed that they've made a silly mistake and I know they can do this thing. And it's to help trying to avoid all of that sort of foul play that potentially goes on in different schools. But we're human beings. I can't guarantee that across the country there are not people doing this sort of thing. And I do think that might have a part to play in why the bar gets raised every single year, because children seem to be, they're doing so well in English and maths. The bar raises more.
I wanted to talk about this quickly, actually, because it's something I really strongly believe in, which kind of then leads to a point of view that people might think my job is pointless, that I think I'm absolutely pointless, but I don't. But I'm going to try and explain my point of view here, because my huge problem is year to year comparisons, especially within the same school.
Yeah.
So on the national scale, hundreds of thousands of children take the test. On the national scale, that's enough data to make an accurate judgment of, whether children are progressing or regressing, whatever it is, right? Within a school, it's so backwards, because you could just get a class who, based on the national average, are well above average. And the next year you could get a class that, based on the national average, are well below. And in the raw scores that get published and that the public see, you could go from 1 year, everyone 90% plus in English, reading, in maths as well, whatever, 100% across the board, amazing scores. Do the exact same provision, put the exact same amount of work in place, do the exact same research, do the same amount of, guiding and helping the children and doing the exact same thing. And next year, your scores could drop by 20%. And it is literally, quite simply down to, that's the ability of the children in your class. Yep. And there's comparisons made between it. And I think that's so toxic.
I fully agree, by the way. I've always found that insane. Even my first year of teaching, I remember having that kind of thought process of why do we compare year groups at all? That seems pointless for that exact reason you said, because I've seen it. Every school I've ever worked in and every school I've ever heard of, it happens. It's completely normal. They have 1 year where they get 95%, and it's wow, look how well we did. That's always the classic thing. Look how well we did.
That's the thing.
As teachers. Yeah. And the next year they'll get 67%. And
do you know what you have to say? Yeah. You have to say, if you said, look how well we did because of the 95%, you have to then say next year, look how badly we did.
Yeah, but
that's the same logic.
Then we go to, no, the cohort was lower. They were lower.
Yeah, I know. I just think we really have to take a step back and just be look, unless something drastic has changed, personnel's massively changed, or, your schemes or you're doing or anything like that, unless you're looking at kind of the tracking that year group through year 3, year 4, year 5 based on averages, it's pointless. It's you're just going to dig yourself a hole for when it comes out bad eventually, which it will.
I actually don't think a lot of people do. I reckon a lot of teachers, a lot of people in this profession do genuinely just take that with a pinch of salt, comparing. But we do like to talk about it for some reason. But
I think they do. And I think my point more was these stats get pushed, they're put up on the wall.
Sure.
Percent in reading, percent. They're the simplification of it, and that nuance. Absolutely, lots of teachers have that, but parents don't necessarily. Yeah. And I think some staff still cling on to that as if, well, that's our benchmark, and it's it's just not though, is it?
It was our benchmark for that cohort of children, but they're gone now. It's a new cohort of children. I think I had an old head teacher of mine who I don't work for anymore, made a really good point, and I really learned something from him when he said this, because I was quite new to SATs and things at the time. It was actually my first year in year 6. It was all a whole new world to me. And I was falling into that trap of being super worried about the data and comparing it to last year and all that sort of stuff. And he said to me, don't worry about all this. Just stop worrying about this. He's the only thing that matters is their progress data on an individual level. Yeah. And I didn't really know what he meant. And he really explained to me, he was look, each child is tracked and we track their progress. And basically, I don't know how much you know about this, Dylan, but every child basically gets a plus or a minus number at the end of Key Stage 2 to see how much progress they've made since Key Stage 1. And that's tracked. And that's what he cared about. And I was like, do you know what? Actually, that's a really good approach. Yeah, okay, our data he might not be so worried about our data, the stuff that goes to the public, which we should care about because, like you said, at the end of the day, the wider community do form opinions on it, so we can't not care about it at all. But from his point of view, for the children and for us as teachers, it was way more relevant to look at the individual learning progress journey of those children and identify children who are lower down on that journey. They're the children. If you're going to put focus time into any children, it's not to sneak them into the next band, get them to expected or get them to greater depth. It's no, look at the children that need more support because they're not making as much progress. That, that's what, if you've got extra resources, put them there, because those children are not making enough progress. And I really like that.
I think that actually that data does also get published, but it's just way more kind of dense and harder to take in. So you're absolutely right. And again, 99% of schools will use that as the metric, absolutely. And actually, from my point of view, being lower down in the school, it's something we use looking at pupil progress throughout their journey. So it's not something that we kind of just ignore until year 6. We're like, oh God, wait, they need to get to this amount of progress. We look at it now and we're like, okay, well, what was their key stage 1 attainment? What are they tracking for? What do they need to get? Which children need their intervention? And that's the more holistic way to do it, isn't it? Because it's a classic thing of, if you just look at the results, you're always going to go to your bottom chunk, aren't you? And think, well, they're at the bottom, so they need more. They could be making rapid progress. And your children in the middle could be stagnating and not making the progress they need. And it's really nuanced. And I just think the simplistic way sometimes frustrates me, because I just think, okay, it's way more complex than that.
I can think of a good analogy, actually, that just kind of summarizes the flaws that we've just been talking about, right? So if we had a cohort of children that at key stage 1, let's say they're a really, really high ability cohort, and at key stage 1, we had 95% of them across the board was achieving expected. And then at the end of key stage 2, in year 6, we get 90% across the board, which looks like a great number by itself. 90% is a good number in the teaching world. Versus another cohort that came up from key stage 1 at 40% across the board, so really low, and then they ended at 70%. We'd celebrate, generally in the teaching culture and the wider community, we'd celebrate that 90% as like a wow, well done. Whereas objectively, progress-wise, the other set of data has made way more progress, and we should be way more celebratory of a cohort of children going from 40% expected to 70% expected. That's much better. And that, I think, kind of encapsulates the whole argument we were just having quite nicely.
I guess the last thing that I was really thinking about, it comes to mind, hopefully we've kind of summarized what the SATs is and, the arguments for it and the problems it might face. But very quickly, children do actually, a lot of them, and it's important to say this because it's true, they do thrive off it. They really do. There'll always be children who are nervous about it. We need to help them. But you're right. There are children who love test week. They love having a go. It's what they do. It's almost for them like playing a game of football. I was speaking to a child today. I was having my lunch in the hall with the children, and he was just expressing how excited he was that the maths paper was coming up. And I just thought, that's lovely. And, we don't need to, put that person down because we have a view on SATs, maybe that we think as a whole, perhaps there's a better way that we could be assessing the children, especially, key stage 1 SATs when they're 6 and they're doing their year 2 SATs. But, it also, there is a body of thought that these tests prepare them for secondary school, where tests become way more important, way more high stakes when it comes to GCSE, kind of gives them a bit of a dry run. And if they're going to have that anxiety around testing, why not have it at this point when they are old enough to kind of understand what's going on? They're very mature, a lot of the 10 and 11-year-olds who are doing it. Get over that hopefully earlier, get the help they need, the support they need, but still do it. And then when it comes to doing secondary school tests, it's way more kind of par for the course, and they're more used to doing it.
I can honestly say I have spoken to loads of children this week who are just thoroughly enjoying it, to be honest with you. They just are. They are thoroughly enjoying it. But there's, like I said, there's two sides to every coin. There are children also that are stressed and nervous, and that they're the children that we kind of focus on sometimes when we talk about the negative sides of SATs. Dylan, I want to ask you a question. It's the question I get asked all the time by year 6s. I just want to know what your response is. Yeah, it's coming up. 92% in this podcast now of me being bald. So I get asked this all the time by the children and parents, to be fair. I want to know what your answer is, not being a year 6 teacher.
Are you over 45?
No, I made that one up, Dylan. It is, and you probably heard it as well. It is, what's the point of the SATs? What would be your response? Like, as someone that's not taught year 6?
I've not taught in year 6. The point of the SATs, from my point of view, the SATs, like we said, it tracks children's attainment of how well they know the Key Stage 2 curriculum in English and maths. That's the base one. It tracks their progress from progress points in the Key Stage 1 SATs up to Key Stage 2 SATs. I would say also it has kind of not hidden, but a lesser known value, let's say, and we can talk about the value of this, but it is used for predicted grades, isn't it, in secondary school? Yeah. It's used as a metric for that. And I know you go to secondary school and lots of schools will have their own way of, taking tests in the first few weeks to set the children however they want to set them. Don't necessarily use just SATs data, but that data is still logged on the government website and it's still used for progress. Like we said, it's used throughout primary school and the Key Stage 2 SATs, we can see how much they've progressed. That's just another point in the scale where they carry on learning in secondary school, and it's used again to track their progress, right?
Yeah, and that's basically what I say to the children. I just say, look, I look at your Key Stage 1 data all the time just to make sure that people are getting to the right place. If you came up in as greater depth, so if those aren't listening, greater depth is kind of like working well above average in an area, then I want to make sure you're being pushed and you're on track to get to greater depth still, because that shows good progress. And I'll say the same thing happens now to your Key Stage 3 teachers. Will have access to this data, and it gives them a snapshot into your ability, and they'll be held accountable to make sure you ensure that you're making progress through Key Stage 3. And that's the kind of the spiel I give to them. But so often I get this, they'll come in and be like, yeah, well, my mum told me that it's just for the school, and to be honest with you, I don't really need to do it. Don't worry about it. I get it all the time. And part of me is like, yeah, don't worry about it then. Because I'm not going to put all the pressure on you. I'll say to them what I just said. I'm like, yeah, well, it is a little bit important because it gives you Key Stage 3, but ultimately, yeah, it is for the school. And we really want you to do well. We want to show off how well you've done at our school. And I'll just say that, and they're usually like, oh, fair enough. Okay,
well,
I'll try my hardest
then. Basically agree with them.
Yeah, because it's true. Good. It's true, isn't it? It is mostly for us, because it harks right back to the beginning of this conversation. It is mostly for us because we're paid on it. Our school's judged on it. Okay, of course it's for us.
I really enjoyed that chat. It was really good because as a non-year 6 teacher, but someone in a primary school setting, I know we're working towards that, and I know it's a journey through the whole of Key Stage 2. And yeah, so thanks for that. I always find it interesting when staff, when it comes around to SATs results, SLT will make a really nice concerted effort to say, but it's everyone's, it's the whole school journey, and it really is. But even as someone who's not in year 6, I kind of sometimes want to say, yeah, but mainly year 6, thank you. So all you year 6 teachers out there, yes, it's a whole Key Stage 2 thing, but at the end of the day, you're the guys slogging away for that final push, and we appreciate you, but not Hayden, but everyone else, we appreciate you.
I was about to say thanks, but not thanks.
You do all right, pal. You do all right. You got field time now for 8 weeks, so I'm sure you're going to fill that with just going out playing. Yeah, no lessons now, right?
Post SATs life. I hope there's some year 6 teachers listening to this thinking, yeah, post SATs life. The stress does go away a little bit. We usually do performances at schools. That's quite a common thing in year 6. I don't know where that came from, by the way. It's a very bizarre thing, but it just seems to be English culture.
It's lovely.
Year 6 do
I like it.
Performance or something.
It's almost as if they said, okay, I understand how much we've been doing maths and English. Let's do something completely different. We're going to do the arts. And I think it's lovely because, some children really, really love that, and it sparks something.
It's true. Someone said to me before, because I was like, oh, we probably shouldn't though, because that's not like the curriculum properly. And they were like, hey, it is. But all we've done is we've condensed a lot of the maths and English into a slightly smaller time frame and probably sacrificed some of those other subjects. But we're going to do those other subjects. We're not going to miss them out of the year. We're going to do them more afterwards. And I was like, oh, okay, that kind of makes sense. Like, we're still covering the right things. We're just doing them in a different order.
And the spoken word is English. It's still English, and it's drama. It's social skills. I think it's brilliant. I think it's a really cool thing. And again, another step outside the comfort zone. I'm a big fan of controlled stepping out of a comfort zone. And like as a school, we can do that to a degree in terms of stepping out your comfort zone, doing the test, maybe feel a bit anxious, stepping over that, coping with it, getting the right help, getting the right support. I think it's the same when it comes to drama. I did drama in secondary school, massively helped my confidence, hugely, and I loved it. And it just, I think that's something we can do in our job, and that is as useful as teaching them how to add a 3-digit number and a 7-digit number, in my opinion.
Yeah, fair enough. Even if we have this skewed idea of value because of the way the thing works, you're absolutely right. It is just as valuable. So moving on to another conversation. I know we talk about this all the time, and our listeners might be like, oh, for God's sake, get over it at this point. But it's still relevant, okay? We've had all the strikes, obviously. If you're
Is it about your hair?
Oh, sorry. 93%. If you're listening to this way in the future, then you might, it might just be a distant memory now about the strikes. It might still be going on, to be honest with you, where the government are taking this. We might still be striking for the next 6 years. But
mate, no one's listening now. Never mind.
Yeah, but someone put a post on a Facebook group like over a week ago now, and I saved it because I knew I wanted to talk about it. I just want to read it to you, right? And I just think it just highlights what we were talking about in a previous episode. Here we go. This person said, I'm 26. I've been teaching for 4 years. Always wanted to be a teacher. My question is, has teaching always been like this? I have zero disposable income. I work every hour God sends. I get good results. I work all the time. I work hard. Yet we can never seem to afford a holiday. I can't even pay off my student overdraft. I can't even pay off the interest of my student loan. I barely have any money left at the end of the month. At school, they have to ration glue sticks, as we've talked about before, until, the last 20 glue sticks until summer. There's no scissors left. And they said they'll probably just end up paying for it out of their own pocket because it's not worth the hassle doing it at school. And they finished by saying, I grew up under New Labour. And I'm not saying my education was perfect, but I can remember it being better than this. I can remember not having to ration glue sticks. And that was the kind of time that we grew up around then. And yeah, it was. That was when everything new came in, and we got smart boards, we got computer suites, we suddenly got those massive jungle gym things in the playgrounds and in our school halls and stuff. And we didn't have to ration this and that. And it was, this person's basically saying it was a good time. Was it always like this? Like, what was I under some sort of illusion? And they're going to quit because it's just ridiculous. They can't afford, so they need to go and find another job because it's not worth it.
It makes me feel so many different emotions, genuinely, because I don't care. We'll get political again because it is political, right? It is political. The squeeze on this public service that we live in, that we know because we literally work it, has been so devastating. And it makes me so angry that we don't collectively think as a country that our children deserve the absolute best. Not just what we can afford-ish, because we can still afford other stuff, but I'm going to say it's what we can afford. Not what we kind of think is okay. No, our children deserve the literal best. And she's absolutely right. And it's not rose-tinted glasses, it's the fact, because I speak to my parents about their time in school and older people, and they have very negative connotations of school usually because they used to get hit around the head with a chalkboard. They get hit around the head, and then they would say how they'd just skive, it was just rubbish, there was the teachers were horrible to them, etc. My time in school was unbelievable, and we constantly got new stuff, and it wasn't like a coincidence that I have such a positive memory of school, I don't think. And I remember the computer suites coming in must have cost so much money back then. Mm. And she's right. It's not a political thing. No one can sit there and say to me, oh, you're just a lefty, wokey teacher. Hey, you shut up. No, it's just true. It's just a fact. So if you can't deal with a fact, you need to get over yourself. The amount of money in schools right now, no, you do, I'm sorry, is so much less. And the biggest worry I have, I was talking to my friend about this the other day, I'm genuinely worried now that it's been so long of cuts. It is literally insurmountable. Like the amount of money you'd have to now pour back in just to get back to 2010 levels, never mind 1990s, is actually no longer affordable.
And it's
actually no longer affordable.
We have been riding off of the back of all that money we pumped in the 90s for so long now. There's a reason that there's a whole meme culture around how primary schools look exactly the same as they did 25 years ago. Do you know why? Because they look exactly the same as they did 25 years ago, because everything we got new then is still the things we use now because we can't afford new stuff. It's the same. It's the same smart boards that I got when I was 10 that we use on the walls now, and like you said, the amount of money it must have cost to go from nothing to that, in such a short space of time versus the last 20 years where we've barely upgraded these things and said, oh, there's not enough money in the budget, we've got to cut a bit more. It's ridiculous. You're right. We'd need so much money now to actually go to the next level, if we wanted schools to look a bit different.
It's the same kind of thing, with the NEU saying and the junior doctors saying that they're asking for, the junior doctors asked for a 35% pay rise. And the rationale behind it was because that gets them back to 2010 levels. And someone said, is that an unreasonable ask? And the guy, I remember watching it, he was like, no, it's not unreasonable. That's completely reasonable to say, oh, can I get paid the same as what I was getting paid 12 years ago, please? Yeah. Is that okay? Like, that's completely reasonable. It might not be realistic because of the state this country's in, but it's completely reasonable, isn't it? To say, oh, can I have the life that my parents literally had? Or is it actually going to be continuously harder for me? Because if a society has an aim at all, surely it's to make life better as time goes on, not to shoot itself in the foot by voting for Brexit and then pretending everything's fine after. Well, lots of people. Do you know what I heard today? I've got to say this right now.
Go on.
David Davis, the guy who used to be the Brexit secretary for the Conservative Party, big Brexiteer. Someone was basically listing off these things to him that's worse because of Brexit. And it's not even, we're 5 years down, 6-7 years down the line now from Brexit vote, and 4 years down the line from actually leaving, or whatever it is. Like, there is actual data now. Like, it's not just a projection that life's going to get worse. There's actually data now where it is life's got worse. And it's because of these things that came from Brexit. So this guy's reading off the list, the queues in Dover, the limited amount of time you have over in the European countries now, the loss in trade, the amount of money we've lost because it's no longer easy just to trade with our biggest trading partner. And his response made me want to reach through the camera and give him a piece of my mind, because his response was, back in 2019, when 2016, George Osborne said that it's going to cost each family £4,000 Brexit, and that was the scaremongering then. And I went back to my house where there were builders working on a building site, and one of the builders said to me, £4,000 for the cost of freedom, that's good by me.
What?
I said, his response to the list of things that's worse because of Brexit was, yeah, but people don't mind because it's their freedom.
This one guy I met didn't mind, so everyone doesn't mind.
Yeah, who was probably, I think he even said, by the way, that he was like the project manager. The guy who's probably on 90k a year doing this job.
Yeah.
$4,000 for our freedom. What are you talking about? Your freedom. What are you on about?
You're less free now, mate, because you have to work more to get that $4,000.
Yeah, what are you talking about? Honestly.
Yeah.
I just, it beggars belief. It really does.
Well, relating back to that post that I read you, two things really. I want to come back to student debt. Maybe I'll talk about that another time. But someone in my family recently got into teaching, and she's really, really intelligent woman. And
is she bald?
No, she's not bald. Not everyone in my family's bald, actually.
Okay.
Fun fact for everyone. You might have thought that. I understand why people might have assumed that, but yeah. She's not.
Because you're a massive bald head.
94%. So she recently got into teaching. She qualified last year at secondaries, teaching science. So a very important subject. Science is something that people are screaming out for as well. I saw and again, just a slight side point here. Someone the other day was talking about how their science department has not been fully staffed for like 8 years or something like that, because they just cannot get the staff, the specialists in to teach science properly.
Why would you?
Yeah, exactly. And this, what I'm about to say, proves exactly that, because she did 1 year teaching, and then on reflection went, wow, this workload is ridiculous. The pay doesn't remotely reflect it. The media just despises us and doesn't remotely show us in the right light. So see you later. I'm going to go be a chartered accountant. Exactly what I said before. Skilled professionals, the people we need because we want to give our children the best education, don't want to do this job because they can get paid more doing other things, government. That's why we need more money. It's not so that I can line my pockets. It's to attract better people to this profession to teach the future generation.
And you can line your pockets.
And I can line my pockets. That is part of it, okay? But there's so much more to it. I hate the state of what we're in.
I summarize why I strike. I can't remember if I said this in the last episode, but it's my new go-to now, because I've kind of tried to narrow down why I'm striking if anyone asks me. And I'm striking to keep this job. You can't remember the way you said it. You forgot it.
to keep the job in the because the builder I spoke to said that £4,000 was worth the freedom.
I've prefaced something by saying how I've really narrowed it down to something so succinct.
Yeah. Your face is like, oh, I've forgotten it. I feel like I remember what you said. It was not exactly what you said, but wasn't it along the lines of to make this job something that you still want to do, basically? Like you.
Yeah. So that's it. I've thought the word now. I'm striking because I want to keep this job desirable for me to do. I'm not striking because I just am greedy and I'm like, oh, another couple £100, although it would be nice. Another couple £100, yeah, get my pockets. Because I'm striking because I want to do this job. That's what I said. I'm striking because I want to do this job. And very soon, that want to do the job will be lower than the realistic, like what you said with your family member, the realistic lure of a job doing something else
exactly that.
for less stress and more money will very soon be overtaking it, if not already, and I'm just kind of ignoring it.
Yeah, I fully agree. There is a point. I know what my skill set is, and so do you, because we're 8 years into this career. I know what my skill set is. I know what I'm capable of. There is going to be a point eventually where if this pay keeps stagnating, I would be stupid not to go and take the job that pays double that requires my skill set.
Exactly.
That's business. That's business, baby. That's how it works. But it is true, isn't it? And people always say, and this is true because it's why we're still here right now. Teachers do it for the love of, we do it because we love the job. And that is true. But there is a line. There is a point in which people won't do that anymore because it's so silly to do it based on the workload and the pay that obviously they'll just go do something else and be like, oh, it would have been nice to be a teacher, but I'm not stupid and I do want to pay for my house that I live in. So I went and did this. I went and became a chartered accountant. Oh.
Yeah, it's like there's a certain percentage. I'm not going to put a number on it right now, but if someone offered me a 10% pay rise to go and do a job in an office somewhere that I thought might be more boring, I absolutely wouldn't take it. No. I'd be like, nah, that's not the threshold, right? That's just not. I do love this job. I don't want to go into a new career.
What about £1 million?
Well, I'll be there, wouldn't I? But my point is, when you ask someone, would you drink a cup of off milk for 50 quid? And they're like, no. And you're like, well, okay, would you do it for £1,000? Like, yeah, obviously, 900.
Yeah, you find the limit,
800.
find the line.
And you're trying to find the limit. I'm wondering what my limit would be in the job. I think, it wouldn't be that much though. It would just be enough to be like, cool, well, that's going to make a significant change to my life. And my pay, the government treat us absolutely terribly and don't even want to listen to us or give us anything that's remotely useful. So at what point do you say, okay, I love this job, but can I pack it in?
And you always want to make a point of it as well. It's a shame that there's, obviously there's so many of us that on an individual level, it feels like it doesn't really make an impact. But I'd love to be like, cool, by the way, I'm really skilled at this job now because I've done it for 8 years. I'm leaving and you're going to get someone else in. They might be as good as me. They might not be. Good luck with the gamble. I'm going to go do something else. Like I always, but they won't care because they will just, get someone else. But you do.
They won't care because I've got any. And again, guys, I don't think when I'm saying this, I'm not detrimental to ECTs at all. We absolutely thrive off these amazing young people who come into our profession, but you just need the balance of them. And if we are constantly swapping extremely experienced primary school staff for ECTs constantly at a rate which is outstripping, then our profession becomes more inexperienced. There's not enough people for you guys to learn off. There's not enough people for you to inspire us again, because that keeps us fresh. When new teachers come in, I love it. I love talking to them because they have these ideas that I had 5 years ago that slowly have just eroded because I'm more concentrated on the job now. And it's just like a breath of fresh air, but you need that kind of synergy. You need that right balance. And the more that we take away those experienced teachers, it's just going to have a detrimental effect in the profession. Okay, so I've got a story, was messaged in a couple of weeks ago, but obviously we're only just getting a chance to say it now. So Hayden, it's just a story from the classroom, one of the classic ones.
Hey.
We love it because, as well, this person's wrote it in a way where I can just read it off the phone because that's always good. Here it is, guys. Yeah, there it is. Got my little
on screen.
Story here.
Are you going to sing
You've seen a phone
the jingle?
before?
Are you going to sing the jingle to Stories from the Classroom now that we've got video audience as well?
Okay. Ready? Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
Stories from the classroom. If you've got a story for us and it's really funny, tell us the story and we will give you money. Money not guaranteed.
The fact that you did just make that up is quite impressive. Nice and long. Yeah. Again, fits with our podcast.
I'm not finished.
I see. That's more. That was the first verse.
That was a dramatic interlude. That was it.
Go on. I'm buzzing for a story. I haven't had a story in ages.
Okay, this is a good one. So, okay, let me set the scene. So I'm the teacher now, okay?
Okay,
so
right.
This isn't my story, obviously. This is someone that I'm pretending to be. Here we go. Let me set the scene. RE Day. We do a full day focused around one element of religious education. For us, we're learning about Islam. To be specific, we're actually learning about the Prophet Muhammad and his importance to the Islamic faith. A sensitive subject, something you need to approach with maturity and respect. One boy in my class, lovely as he is, likes to think he's a bit of a class clown at times. And he likes to play up to an audience. He'd spent most of the morning trying to call out little quips and make jokes here and there that he thought to be hilarious, such as in response to my question, okay, what do we know about Muhammad? He'd reply, Mohamed Salah's a well good footballer. Classic response, trying to be funny. Anyway, after a while of trying to humor his attempts of being funny, it was beginning to get irritating. We know that feeling, right? When someone just won't let it go. Yeah. You kind of give them an inch and then they take a mile and you're like, oh, I shouldn't have given them that in the first place. So after his attempts, trying to be funny, trying to humor him, it was beginning to get irritating, and it was more importantly, detracting from the learning now. So it was distracting other children. So he'd explained, her patience was waning. I'd explained the role of a prophet was to spread the message of God. Up goes the boy's hand again after me telling him to stop what he's up to. So tentatively, I asked him what he wanted to say. And his reply was, so Muhammad's a bit like Hermes then? At this point, I was done. I held in my desire to shout out, it's not even Hermes now, the delivery service, it's called Every. And I told him to stop trying to be funny and focus on what we're learning about. Sheepishly, he stopped talking and looked at me like I'd done something wrong. Another girl, the angel child, put her hand up. So the prophet is a little bit like the Greek god Hermes. At this point, I realised that my class clown... I realised that my class clown had been making the most meaningful learning link to their prior learning of the Greek gods that anyone had made all day and had ever done before. And I absolutely rinsed him in front of the whole class for it publicly.
Such a classic thing. Jumping the gun there.
They'd just done a whole unit on gods and he was making this unbelievable cross-curricular link. Stop it. Stop that.
It's not even called that. It's called Every now.
Luckily the teacher didn't say that. They managed to hold that in and just be like, stop doing that.
Yeah, sure.
But it's absolutely cracked me up, and it made me think of so many times before in the classroom. I've done it before, like to the extremes as well, where a child will say, put their hand up and say, oh, can I go to the toilet? I'm like, yeah, sure. I'm in the middle of doing something. Yeah, sure. They stand up, walk across the classroom, and I go, why are you at your seat? And they just go, oh, you just said I could go to the toilet. And I've said to them before, did I?
Yeah.
And they say yes. I'm like, okay. To the point now where someone could just say to me, I would be like, why are you see? They could literally just say to me, oh, you just told me I go to the toilet. And I believe them. I was like, okay.
Yeah. Funny, a few weeks ago, I had a very similar situation, right? A boy in my class who can sometimes get himself in trouble, but he's a nice enough boy. He wanted to show his work to the head teacher because he'd done some really good work, and I was like, yeah, awesome. But I was kind of in the middle of doing something when he asked. I think I was like getting the register ready or something. So can I go and show this to the head teacher? I was like, yeah, brilliant, cool, yeah, go on, off you go. Yep, carried on doing the thing I was doing, and then he came back into class at like I don't know 5 minutes later, and I instantly went, why are you coming back in late? Thinking that he'd like been sent out during lunchtime or something, and he'd been naughty, and he's coming back into class because the head teacher sent him back. I was like, why have you... I was putting on my stern face just to be like, really disappointed. That's bad. Why have you made a bad behavioural choice? And he really sheepishly just went, you said I could show my work. And I was like, oh, of course I did. And I went over and I was like, I'm so sorry. I was like, I'm so sorry for judging you like that. I literally just apologised to him and sat him down. I was like, I'm really sorry. I don't know why I jumped at you like that.
And that's the other thing I thought about when I read that story. I was like, I think that's so important to the children. And jokes aside about, I made that mistake on purpose. I think when you do something like that, because that is a position of power there, isn't it? And you've got the power and you can, tell someone off because you're in charge. I think when you do that incorrectly and wrongly, I think it's so powerful just to say to the children, oh, I'm really sorry. That was I was wrong.
Yeah.
You've done nothing wrong. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Rather than brush it off, because I think as soon as you brush it off, you kind of lose that respect then.
Yeah.
Because later on down the line, when you have to actually tell them, it's going to hold more weight when you say, no, you do have to stop doing that because of this and that.
Children, like you said, you mentioned it earlier, but they're more mature than you think. They're cleverer than you think they are at the age that they are. They might seem like small and cute and silly sometimes what they say, but with those sorts of things, they're not silly. They do know when you're clearly just blagging it and you're actually just wrong and you're embarrassed and you just don't want to admit it. So I agree. Always own up to your mistakes, honestly. Unless you are having a literal, that exact joke that we mentioned where you pretend that you were making a mistake.
Yeah. But if it's a mass mistake on the board, it's different.
Exactly, you're having a laugh. But with real mistakes that you make, you might be a bit embarrassed because you just made a mistake in front of 30 kids. Say sorry and own up to it. Because even if they go, I promise you they won't do it for many times. They might find it funny the first time. Well, your teacher made a mistake. Once or twice, though, but they don't do that anymore.
Who cares if you're a bit embarrassed? That's a feeling people feel sometimes. They would feel embarrassed because you wrongly told them that they did something that they didn't.
Exactly.
Just own up to it. I had something today very similar. where, I had to remind someone of the right behavior in class a few times in a row, someone that doesn't normally need reminding. And when I then said, okay, look, you've done this repeatedly, and you're really letting me down here. And a little bit of spiel about how, I don't expect that from anyone, especially, I must say, I've never expected that from you. Something like, that kind of just saying, this is unacceptable though. And I've never had to use this kind of tone with you before, but that needs to stop.
Yeah.
And I loved it because immediately this child said, oh, I'm really sorry. And they really meant it. And I was like, that right there, that moment of them saying sorry is the exact reason why, as teachers, we need to be apologetic and say sorry. Because that was really nice. Because you know what children do? They're children. They're a bit, upset about something. They don't like being told off. And they won't say sorry. They'll just kind of go into their own little introspective cave and be like, or say, oh, it wasn't me. Do the opposite and just kind of deflect anything. But that moment of this child saying, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Price. I was like, cool, it's over now. It's immediately over. I feel much better. Thank you so much. You still might have to do this for me. You might have to do that because you did cross the line too much. But I made a huge point of saying thank you. I really appreciate that. And I thought that was really a
modeling that
thing.
Saying sorry isn't just a thing. It's actually thank you. Like you were sorry. Yeah. I know we're coming to the end of our podcast. I've got one sort of heartwarming, or just a nice thing that happened actually this week that I have just thought of based on your story there that I'm going to share with you. But before I do that, if you want to write in your stories or you've got something funny to share, even if you think, oh, maybe it's not funny, write it in anyway, okay? If we think it's rubbish, we won't read it, all right? So don't worry about it. No, I'm joking, but we won't. But you can write into us at... Oh, Dylan, I'm going to get it wrong again.
You've heard some of the stories we've read.
Yeah,
I mean, there's a pretty low bar.
Low bar. Right, Dylan, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm terrible because,
Why don't I just say it?
No,
because then I know that it's right.
I'm never going to learn. I'm never going to learn. So our Instagram... Oh, no, I don't know. It's Teach, Sleep, Repeat Pod.
No?
Cast. Just do it, Dylan. Just do it.
Right, Instagram, Teach, Sleep, Repeat Podcast. Email, teachsleeprepeatpod@gmail.com. What you've got to remember, Hayden, is I made it longer when it was shorter, when it didn't have the end of the email.
Right, that's what I was trying to think, and I couldn't remember what you said.
Okay.
I couldn't remember.
So the bulk of it is longer when there's no Gmail at the end.
Yep. Okay.
So Hayden, why don't you tell the viewers and the listeners and the creeps and whatever we're going to call you? You've got your own name. I'm staring at you now. Ooh. If I swear, if you're watching this right now and you see me staring into your soul, I can't believe you just sat for an hour and watched this video of us just sitting here. I appreciate you, but I don't know what you think you're doing.
And you could tell your friends to come watch it. You could tell them. Oh, I wouldn't.
Yeah, after.
I wouldn't, but you could, because we do want more people to watch and listen. So that would be nice. I'm not going to embarrass myself, Dylan. You've said what the handles are, and I'm not going to do it. I'll practice for next week. But I'm going to finish up with a little story, okay? And it is just related. It's basically continuing from the conversation we just had. So sorry for completely ruining the flow. I had today. I spoke to somebody that I teach, and had a really nice conversation based on a reflection of a conversation we'd had 3-4 months ago, right? And this is a child who continuously gets himself in trouble. I particularly like this child, and I think they're a lovely, lovely young person, but they always seem to get themselves in trouble, like wrong place, wrong time, and also just doing silly things all the time.
We all know the type, don't we, as teachers?
And as year 6, I found that I can have, with particular children, if I sort of identify their maturity as being quite mature, I will have this conversation with them, right? But I won't do it with younger because I don't think it's beneficial yet. And basically, I sat down with him, and he'd been like sent out or something like that. And I happened to be walking past. I said, "Why are you? What's going on? You've been sent out again." And he had a bit of a tear, and we had a chat. And I just explained to him that reputation is important. And because we have this thing of like, everyone needs to be treated the same. Everyone needs to be treated the same. But I just broke it to him in the real world, by the way. Everyone just has a reputation, and whether you like it or not, you'll be treated differently based on their reputation. Not necessarily on purpose. That's when it gets into problem area, but subliminally, people will treat you differently. And I said, do you think maybe the reason that you've been caught or whatever doing or sent out so quickly recently of these lessons because he was really frustrated that other people had done what he did, but he was sent out? I said, yeah, because your reputation's not good at the moment. People have got shorter fuses with you, and they don't mean to do it. But people have got shorter fuses with you because of your reputation recently, where you have been doing silly things. You've been making silly decisions at any possible opportunity. And I had this conversation with him, and he did really understand. He was like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. They're not just picking on me, because that's what people think. Oh, that teacher's picking on me. No, they're not. They didn't even think about it. It's just that your reputation has led them to believe that you've done something silly quicker maybe than they would do the child that never gets in trouble. Never gets in trouble. They've got more leeway because they've got a good reputation. And since then, this particular child has really thought about it and came up to me today and said, Mr. Stevens, have you noticed? I was like, what? I've been in a lot less trouble recently. I was like, oh, that's really good. He was like, my reputation's getting better, isn't it?
Oh.
And I was like, it is. It is getting better. Well done, you. Like people, and I said, and you get a fresh start. You know, when you go to your next school, you're gonna get a fresh start. Yeah. And your reputation is whatever you choose to forge it. I said, but I'm so proud of you for right now trying to better your reputation so that people don't treat you in a different way automatically based on their experiences of you in the past. And I was really, really proud of him, and I was so impressed that. I thought there was part of me at the time of having the conversation, I was like, none of this is going in. He's just annoyed that he got sent out. But really, really listened to it. And that just made my day. And that's one of those. And again, we talk about those reasons that we love this job and why I wouldn't go and do an office job for, 10% more money. It's those little moments like that I've
Try telling Steve from accounts that his reputation's bad. He won't change it.
Exactly. When you're getting out, you're arrogant by then, stubborn. But this kid listened. And I loved that moment. And I hope it warmed your heart too.
No, it did. It really did, actually. That was really nice. In fact, if I was sat in an assembly now, I'd be crying. But I'm not. But no, that's lovely. And it is, I'm just going to come up with one thing with that. It is so true. And it's nice to teach them that kind of personal accountability. Sometimes we can fall into the trap of pointing at everyone else and being like, you're doing this wrong to me, which, as you said, is really important because sometimes it is way past the line. Discrimination, all that kind of stuff, it's completely wrong and there's no victim blaming at all there. But if someone has a pattern of getting themselves into trouble because of choices they're making, such a powerful thing you've opened up for him there is to think he has control over that and he's seen the benefits. And, that's the kind of thing in 5, 10, 15 years, he might still remember. And like you said, you're going to maybe remember that story. And that's why this job is amazing.
And you probably notice I was saying I'm really careful when I talk about this sort of thing because if you're not at the right sort of maturity, I can understand why a child might just go home and say, "Oh, this teacher said I've got a bad reputation and they're picking on me for it." You have to be really careful because that's not what it is. And like you said, that there is a fine line between having a bad reputation and actually people just being discriminatory towards you for whatever reason. So you don't want to teach a child that if you're being discriminated against, it's okay, it's your fault. Like that's a really, really, really bad thing to teach people.
So true.
You cannot do that. Yeah. But the idea of reputation, I think he was old enough to understand it. And it all stems from my experience at school. I did the thing. I was at secondary school and I'd always come home. I was that annoying kid. I'd be like, yeah, teacher's picking on me. They sent me out because I did this. Other children. I was always like that. And looking back at it, I feel like such an idiot. It's like, of course they sent me out. It's because I messed around 50 times in the previous 4 weeks. Do you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, of course they had a shorter fuse of me because I constantly showed them that I was a nuisance. They weren't picking on me at all.
You're still insufferable. So,
and with that, we'll end the podcast there. Thanks for listening.
See you next week, guys.